Hi 4CW. So we have finished the amazing Ice Monster book. So I thought we'd start this one. This one is by an author called Neil Gaiman, who we've read a few of his books at school this on the book corner, and he has written this book called Odd and the Frost Giant, which I really hope you're going to enjoy. So you can see what some of his books that you might have read here. You guys might recognise Coraline, Fortune in the Milk, The Graver, but we've definitely got in the book corner as well. So these are really cool books if you're looking for anything new to read. It's got an index, all the chapters on. So we're going to start with chapter 1. There was a boy called Odd, and there was nothing strange or unusual about that. Not in that time or place. Odd meant the tip of a blade, and it was a lucky name. He was odd, though. At least the other villagers thought so. But if there was one thing that he wasn't, it was lucky. His father had been killed during a sea raid 2 years before, when Odd was 10. It was not unknown for people to get killed in sea raids. But his father wasn't killed by a Scotsman, dying in glory in the heat of battle, as a Viking should. He had jumped overboard to rescue one of the stocky little ponies that they took with them on their raids as pack animals. They would load the ponies up with all the gold and valuables and food and weapons that they could find, and the ponies would trudge back to the longship. The ponies are the most valuable and hard-working thing on the ship. After Olaf the Tall was killed by a Scotsman, Odd's father had to look after the ponies. Odd's father wasn't very experienced with ponies, being a woodcutter and woodcarver by trade, but he did his best. On the return journey, one of the ponies got loose during a squall off Orkney and fell overboard. Odd's father jumped into this grey sea with a rope, pulled the pony back to the ship, and with the other Vikings hauled it back on the deck. He died for the next morning of cold and the wet and the water in his lungs. When they returned to Norway, they told Odd's mother, and Odd's mother told Odd. Odd just shrugged. He didn't cry, he didn't say anything. Nobody knew what Odd was feeling inside. Nobody knew what he thought. And in a village on the banks of the fjord, where everyone knew everyone's business, that was infuriating. There was no full-time Vikings back then. Everyone had another job. Sea raiding was something men did for fun, or to get things they couldn't find in their village. They even got their wives that way. Odd's mother, who was as dark as Odd's father had been fair, had been brought to the fjord in a longship from Scotland. When Odd was small, she would sing him the ballads that she had learnt as a girl, back before Odd's father had taken her knife away and thrown her over his shoulder and carried her back to the longboat. Odd wondered if she missed Scotland, but when he asked her, she said no, not really. She just missed people who spoke her language. She could speak the Norse tongue now, but with an accent. Odd's father had been a master of the axe. He'd had a one-room cabin that he built from logs deep in the little forest beneath the fjord, and he would go out to the woods and return a week or so later with a handcart piled high with logs, all ready to weather and split. For they made everything they could out of wood in those parts. Wooden nails, joined wooden boards to wooden dwellings, or wooden boats. In the winter, when the snow was too deep for travel, Odd's father would sit by the fire and carve, making wood into faces and toys and drinking cups and bowls, while Odd's mother sewed and cooked and always sang. She had a beautiful voice. Odd didn't understand the words of the songs she sang, but she would translate them after she had sung them, and his head would roll with the fine lords riding out of their great horses, their noble falcons on their wrists, a brave hound always padding by their sides, off to get into all manner of trouble, fighting giants and rescuing maidens and freeing the oppressed from tyranny. After Odd's father died, his mother sang less and less. Odd kept smiling though, and it drove the villagers mad. He even smiled after the accident that crippled his right leg. It was 3 weeks after the longship had come back without his father's body. Odd had been taking his father's tree-cutting axe, so huge he could hardly lift it, and hauled it out onto the woods, certain that he knew all there was to know about wood-cutting and determined to put this knowledge into practice. He should possibly, he admitted to his mother later, have used a smaller axe and a much smaller tree to practice on. Still, what he did was remarkable. After the tree had fallen on his foot, he had used the axe to dig away the earth beneath his leg and had pulled it out, and had cut a branch to make himself a crutch to lean on, as the bones in his leg were shattered. And somehow he had gotten himself home, hauling his father's heavy axe with him, for metal was rare in those hills, and axes needed to be bartered or stolen, and he could not have left it to rust. So 2 years passed, and Odd's mother married fat Alfred, who was amiable, that means friendly and good-natured, enough, and he had not been drinking. But he already had 4 sons and 3 daughters from a previous marriage. His wife had been struck by lightning, and he had no time for a crippled stepson. So Odd spent more and more time out in the great woods. Odd loved the spring, when the waterfall began to course in the valley and the woodland was covered with flowers. He liked summer, when the first berries began to ripen, and autumn, when there were nuts and small apples. Odd did not care for winter, when the villagers spent as much time as they could in the village's great hall, eating root vegetables and salted meat. In the winter, the men would fight and fart and sing and sleep and wake and fight again, and the women would shake their heads and sew and knit and mend. By March, the worst of the winter would be over. The snow would thaw, the river began to run, and the world would wake itself again. We're going to stop there and read some more tomorrow. Hope you enjoyed the start of the book.